Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our May 2020 Third Tuesday at 3 webcast event, Response and Recovery. My name's Allen Falcon. I'm the CEO and a bit of a cloud pragmatic evangelist here at Cumulus Global. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to join us here, whether you're here joining us in the live session or you've logged in to our website and are watching this recording on demand. Thank you for joining us here today. We've got a lot of ground to cover. A lot of things with respect to the COVID-19 crisis and attempts to reopen the economy and change the way we do business are in flux. And so we're trying to get a good handle on it and share the knowledge that we've gathered on a broad spectrum of issues, not just technology, with you here this afternoon, here with you today. So thank you for joining us. A couple of things, as always. Our audio is muted. That prevents the background noise from interfering. So if at any point in time you have any questions, there's a questions window along the top right-hand side of the screen. Please click on that icon, open it up. I get alerted that you've got a question. I can answer it and track. We've got plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the session as well. We do record these sessions as we do with all of our webcasts. So generally within 24 hours, hopefully by the end of the day today, this will be up on our website. We'll send you a link to that recording. Please share it with anyone you think might find the information is useful. Our third Tuesday at 3 webcasts are part of an ongoing series. We have other series and resources available. We sort of stepped up our communication and our information efforts as well. Currently, we have 3 Coffee and Cloud series webcasts available on demand: Ensuring Safe and Secure Work from Home, Successful Teams in G Suite, and Successful Teams in Office 365. Coffee and Clouds are short. They're about 20 minutes in length. The recordings run about 20 minutes in length. We go a little bit longer with Q&A when we do them live. They're very clear, concise, and to the point. They move quickly, and if you watch on demand, if you choose, we'll send you a Dunkin' or a Starbucks coffee gift card for use at a later date. The coffee's on us. You may be aware that we've also been doing a fair amount of blogging and posting, a range of COVID-19 resources. We've reorganized our homepage again to make that easier to use. We have an index there, both of business resources. These are dealing with legal, financial, PPP program, government assistance, and other general business issues and resources. And then we've got a list of technology-focused blog posts on how we're using technology or how you can use technology to adapt your business as our business environments and our markets change a bit as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, how the world and how we as businesses and families and people respond. At any point in time, if you've got an issue or question, please contact us, info@cumulusglobal.com. We'll filter it out, and the right person on our team will get back to you. So thanks for joining us. And now that we've completed with the pleasantries, let's dive right into the topic. And so when we think about what we have up for discussion today, it's around 4 main themes: the business climate, taking your business from survival mode into back to thriving, what that means as far as your technology and making sure that you're on target with your spending and your savings. And let's talk about your recovery roadmap. How do you get from where you are today to where you want to be 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years from now? And so it's a lot to cover, so let's dive in. So let's talk about the business climate. Have done a lot of research over the last several days as some states have started to open up, looking at what's happened in other countries. And really, when we talk about the recovery from COVID-19 epidemic, the pace of recovery is really to be determined. And that's because we're really not out of the woods. In most areas of the country, opening up doesn't mean the virus is gone, that it's stopped spreading. It means that the spread is controlled enough that we're not overwhelming, or we're not going to overwhelm, hopefully, our healthcare system. What's also coming to play is we look at how some states are guiding opening up, or some localities are guiding the reopening of the economy, that we expect the business climate is going to vary greatly, not only geographically, but by industry. So for example, here in Massachusetts, there's a 4-phase program for opening that'll take at least 12 weeks to go through, although we'll never exit phase 4 until there's viable treatments or a viable vaccine that's readily available. But even those 4 phases are being applied on different time frames to different industries based predominantly on their level of interpersonal contact and the likelihood that operating those industries or those businesses could foster the spread of the virus. And so where offices and labs might open up, sooner than other types of businesses, we expect that geographic diversity is going to come into play. And it's not just an issue for your business where you're located or if you have multiple locations, but think about your customers as well. If you're B2B and your customers have multiple locations, know that what they're able to do at each location, how they're operating, facility to facility might be somewhat different in the rules. I mean, even looking at the recent Supreme Court decision in Wisconsin really said that the statewide stay at home and quarantine and opening guidance wasn't valid. However, the authority still lies with county and municipality health departments and health officers. And so you could have a situation in Wisconsin where the rules will vary by county, if not by individual city or town. And so it's going to get confusing. It's going to get a little chaotic. It's going to stay a little confusing, stay a little chaotic. The other thing we're seeing in the business climate is that, some supply chains might recover more quickly than others. We don't expect any of that recovery to be smooth. We expect fits and starts and bumps in the road, both for consumer and commercial supply chains, in part because the impact of COVID-19 varies by location within the US and internationally. And so whether it's material goods or human resources, expect that those disruptions and the unexpected is going to happen. And finally, the fact that nationally we're at about 15% unemployment. That's generally seen as an underestimation, is that we know that there are a number of people who have stopped seeking work, so the actual unemployment might be as high as 20 or 22%. That level of unemployment, even as people start returning to work, will impact people's confidence, and that lack of confidence will likely impact spending. We also see that in the various business roundtables I participate in, and some of the industry groups, that given that the pace of recovery is so uncertain, you might find that your business customers are hesitating on certain types of expenditures, or at least still looking to cut operating costs and decide where to spend very selectively and very strategically. And so, if you ask me what, one word to sum it up, it would be uncertain. However, I still remain almost cautiously optimistic that the pace of recovery will be good enough that most businesses will be able to get back on their feet and survive. So what should we expect going forward? As I talked a little bit about it earlier, fits and starts. When we look at the Massachusetts 4-phase plan, the governor's been very straightforward, saying that we'll take restrictions off. If things get out of control a little bit, we'll put them back on. We're starting to see that in some locations around the US, and certainly countries that are ahead of us in the cycle. South Korea, Germany are two notable examples that have reinstated restrictions, as they're 4 to 6 weeks ahead of us in opening the economy, and they've seen growth. And so as another example, if we look at Texas, which started to reopen on May 1st, the 14-day trend in COVID-19 cases is up 23%, and deaths are up 12.8%, and still trending higher. And actually, the trend higher, the death trend seems to be accelerating as time goes on. So it's not unreasonable to expect that at some point Texas may look at the increase in cases and increased death rate and decide to scale back to further restrict the spread of the virus. And some businesses that are currently opening and operating in a certain way might have new restrictions put on them, or might be forced to shut operations again. And so as part of our planning, we need to expect that operation, that you might be able to open your office and have some of your people come in this week, and next week, the week after, that may not be the case. And so the word of the day is adaptation. Our work and our life have changed. We've learned a couple of things from this crisis. One, a lot more people can work from home effectively and efficiently than we currently, that we previously thought, or were willing to admit, or even willing to experiment with. For not just consumer, but business-facing businesses, the whole concept of remote service and support pickup and delivery as opposed to the in-person, interpersonal interactions is definitely a way that work and life have changed and will probably be that way for many months to come. And so that no touch or limited personal interaction type of business transaction and being able to master that for our businesses is critical in the near term and probably in the long term as well. And finally, the biggest adaptation is the use of video. The use of video conferencing has skyrocketed, no surprise there. 55% or more of interpersonal communications nonverbal, so having that visual cue when you're in meetings, when you're discussing topics, sensitive or otherwise with people is always good to have. And so as we think about our businesses and we think about adapting them, all of these things come into play. Even as our offices open up, possibly with reduced capacity, the whole concept of no touch and limited personal action is still going to come into play. And so the next thing that really comes into play is business climate is really an emphasis on communications. And here it's not just, telling people what we're doing, right? So, the team here at Cumulus Global, we've stepped up our communications, not just in providing information that we hope is valuable and timely and useful to not just our customers, but the small and mid-sized business community at large. But we've been spending hours and hours, really days of effort in reaching out to our customers and clients and even people we've worked with in the past who aren't currently our customers or people who chose not to go with us. We're asking them what's going on, how they're impacted, where are their pain points, what's working, what's not. We're listening and learning. We're sharing that knowledge with others. And in the process, to help our micro business climate, in many cases, we're helping identify new sets of challenges, needs, priorities, plans that businesses have and risks they're facing. That knowledge that we gain by listening doesn't just give us the ability to tap our resources to assist that company with their immediate needs, but it gives us great data points and information for redefining our services and our service offerings. So as companies move forward, communications, particularly the listening and learning part, are going to be a key part of the business climate. And we're seeing it more of an expectation now than it has been in the past. And that listening and learning message becomes pervasive, not just in the micro or the macro business climate, but really in your interactions. It becomes visible in your marketing efforts, in your sales communications, and how you service and support your clients, and how you deal with your consumers if you're in a B2C type business. And so when we talk about going from survive to thrive, I sort of want to share my favorite crisis management model. And I've learned this from a couple of pilots. One after having been on a plane that needed this. And when something goes terribly wrong on an aircraft, the first thing the cockpit crew does is aviate, right? It makes sense. Keep the plane in the air, don't let it crash. You're not quite worried about where you are or even what direction you're flying in. You've just got to stabilize the aircraft so it stays in the air. When that no longer takes up all of your time, energy, and focus, you can then navigate, figure out where you are, figure out where you need to go and how you're going to get there to make that safe landing. Now, granted, while you're aviating, you might be communicating with the rest of the cockpit crew. You might be talking to air traffic control, declaring an emergency. When you're navigating, you're certainly going to be talking to air traffic control, and possibly even your own operations center for your airline. But your focus is really on keeping the plane in the air and getting it to someplace where you can land safely. When those two tasks no longer require all of your time and attention, that's when you communicate. So this is when you let the cabin crew know what's going on, you talk to the passengers, you provide additional details, maybe dump data files off to your operations center, get advice on what to happen. Now, if any point in the course of action is, you've stabilized the plane, you know where you're going to land, you know how you're going to get there, you're communicating, something unexpected happens, you go back, all your focus goes back to aviating, then to navigating, and back to communicating. And at each phase in the crisis management module, you need to assess what's happening, you need to act. Based on that assessment, you need to manage the overall process. And so what happens long term, after you're done, when you're able to aviate, navigate, communicate, then you can start to mitigate. What can we do to minimize the risk, minimize the damage, minimize the impact? We and that's more of the long-term approach for longer-term crisis management, opportunities, if you will. And so using this model, as we go through the rest of the presentation, think about where you're at with your business, where you are as far as your business stability, how you're going to come out of this safely, what you're communicating here, to and from other people, and what are your longer term mitigation strategies to deal with the longer term impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, and sort of take that as a model. What it comes down to are those actions, right? So you want to assess, and we always recommend starting with the business impact. Look at your current needs and your current readiness. What are the objectives and outcomes that you want to achieve? Now, in the short term, the assessment, right, if you're aviating, the business impact is revenues dropped off precipitously. The business outcome is you need to stabilize revenue and costs and operate as profitably as possible. What are your current needs? What's your readiness to make those decisions? Then you can act. You can plan your strategy and the tactics that'll help you, or the specific tasks you're going to do to achieve that strategy, and understand the value proposition. And when we look at the value proposition, it's not just how much does it cost to accomplish something, but what's the cost if you decide not to do it, right? So sometimes you look and say, well, gee, I want to do this, I need to do this, but it costs money. There's a value to it. You need to weigh that against saying, well, if I don't do that, right, and something happens, what's the potential cost and risk, and is that too great? And so you have to look at both sides, the positive reinforcement and the negative reinforcement of the value proposition. And finally, you have to manage those operations and those projects that you pick, or the decisions you make and the actions that follow. And this sort of all flows through the aviate, navigate, communicate cycle as well. And so that's sort of the model of crisis management. So we think about that. Now let's talk about coming out of COVID-19, your response and your recovery. And in talking with a number of experts, and again, we've been participating in webcasts and sharing those. We've been communicating with a wide range of business consultants and professionals, and some recommendations commonly come across. The first one is really get a handle on your cash flow, right? Understand, be tracking it aggressively and continuously, plan for it. So if you do monthly invoices, project out what your monthly invoices are going to look like. Manage, track who's paying what and how much, what's happening with delinquencies. Are they on the increase? Are customers in trouble financially? Can they not afford to pay you? Can they only afford to pay part? And manage that process. Ideally, a lot of folks talk about having monthly forecasts. We've heard a lot of advice in having a weekly forecast rolling forward 13 weeks. So that's a quarter of a year. Each week you update it to get a projection of where you are with cash flow. You can be profitable and run out of money. And one of the things we know right now is that even with the PPP loans, the EIDL, which the size of the loans are restricted, and other mechanisms, most businesses are under duress, and therefore refinancing or getting new lines of credit could be quite difficult. So you don't want to run out of that cash. And so it really comes into an integrated approach to invoicing, collections, and expense management. When we talk about collections, we're not talking about necessarily iron-fisted. We're talking about working with your customers to get the money they owe you in a reasonable enough time that it helps your cash flow, but you don't cut them off as a customer or hurt their business in a way that you lose them permanently. Unless, of course, they're failing, obviously, you want to cover your losses and minimize that. Next is financial management. That's the whole range of financing, not just, but also including PPP loan forgiveness in that process. We posted a blog post last evening summarizing, collating a bunch of opinions and analysis of the PPP loan forgiveness application and instructions, and some caveats and warnings there that you should be aware of. There's also the IRS Employee Retention Credit Program if you didn't get a PPP loan. And remember that the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, or the FFCRA, has a potential financial impact on your business, and that employees have rights to extended sick and family leave is one of the components, which is reimbursed to you at certain levels, sometimes in cash, sometimes as a credit against your payroll taxes. And so you could be fronting the money only to see that reimbursed later, or have your expenses reduced at a later time. So there's a financial impact there. There are also tax implications around COVID-19, particularly with layoffs, people returning to work, and financing options. And don't forget, you still have your regulatory compliance. Even if people are working from home, they need to be secure. Rules like PCI, HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, the FINRA and SEC rules, Massachusetts PII, California Consumer Protection Act, GDPR, are all still in play and still need to be honored. So you've got to prepare. So if you take a step back and at the back office, you've dealt with your finances, you're in touch with your accountant, your legal team, your legal counsel, you've looked at your contracts and understand force majeure, where it can come into play, where it can't. You've communicated with not only your customers, but your vendors and members of your supply chain. Now it's time to start possibly opening up, and it's really important to understand the rules and guidance. And here we sort of look at the funnel. Start with the federal guidelines. The CDC has done a number of great publications. We have a resource list at the end with many of them listed. They're the official published ones. There's also a more comprehensive one that was leaked to the Associated Press. We've got a blog post and a link to it on our website. Don't forget, you might have OSHA requirements, Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, EEO, still is in play, and you've got Americans with Disabilities Act compliance as well that still need to be in place. Knowing that OSHA and ADA may impose additional requirements on how you adapt workspaces and work process as people come back to work to provide sufficient safety and sufficient accommodations. And the EEO is watching diligently to make sure that as you bring people back and decisions are made, that there's no deliberate or implicit bias in those decisions. Once you work through and go through those federal guidelines and regulations, each state has its own set of stay-at-home or safer-at-home guidelines. Many are phasing things geographically and by industry. Know where you fit in. As importantly, know where your customers fit in, because that will alter how they do their business, therefore how they interact with you. And then whether you own your space or not, there might be specific rules to each of your facilities or to your office space. We rent in an office space. Our landlord has set rules about who's allowed in the business and is setting the guidelines for sanitation and disinfection of common areas. And so, for example, we're not getting deliveries to our office suites anymore. They're going to a common area in a lobby and then being sanitized and brought to our door by the management company. There's some challenges in all of this, obviously, that rules are going to vary by location and industry. The status of your customers is going to vary greatly as we see out in the marketplace right now. You will also have to deal with employee needs and concerns. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And of course, I've already mentioned supply chain and resource availability. So for example, as we talk about preparing our place, one of the things we talk about is ample supplies, right? And so you think about people coming back, having disinfectant spray, and wipes, so people can keep their personal spaces clean, enough supplies to clean common areas. You might even need to help provide it to your building if they're responsible for common areas and common bathrooms that are used by multiple offices, to make sure those are clean and understanding that protocol. Do you have enough? Are you giving people face masks or face coverings to wear while at their workstation if need be? Or if you can separate people far enough while they're working, at least when they head to common areas like the kitchen, the break room, the reception area, the mailroom, etc. And so you need those ample supplies. Now, all that comes through a safe to work policy, where you set the rules of who's coming into the office, when, why, and how. Also indicating, of course, employees who may be exposed or may have any symptoms should not come into the office at all. That should go without saying. You might find yourself needing to reconfigure workspaces. In Massachusetts right now, next week, as an example, offices like ours will be able to open up at 25% capacity. That means people need to be physically spread out. For some businesses, that might mean reconfiguring workspaces or shifting, depending on who's coming in, shifting where people sit. Putting up barriers between some of the workspaces might be appropriate as well. Reconfiguring the workspace might also be deciding, are you going to do shifts? Have a morning shift and an afternoon shift? Are you going to have a rotating in-office day schedule? How are you going to manage it so that everyone who needs to be or wants to be in the office can have their turn? Or are you still going to have, how are you going to manage that mix of work at home and work in the office? We've already talked about sanitizing and disinfecting. It's not enough to say you're going to do it. You actually have to do it. You need a program. You need people responsible. You need to track that you're doing it. Why do you need to track that you're doing it? Because bringing people to the office and the spread of the disease right now creates liabilities for companies. What happens if an employee comes into the office and believes they've gotten sick because you had them come into the office, right? You need to be able to show you're taking those commercially reasonable steps to protect people's health and well-being. It's a responsibility we all have as employees. And one of the trickiest aspects is managing common areas. Like I said, we rent in our office space, so bathrooms are common areas down the hall. We've got an elevator, we've got staircases and outside doors. We're not responsible for cleaning those, but we need to make sure that our management company that runs the building, that their cleaning and disinfectant plan is sufficient enough that we feel it's safe for our employees to return to the physical workspace. As you put your place in, as you prepare your place, you want to also prepare your people. Communication's key. The more you can communicate in advance, the better. Make sure people understand what the plan is, how it's going to work, what their expectations are, and any policies and procedures you're creating. So they should understand the disinfectant and sanitizing procedures. They should understand expectations for them as employees for personal responsibility as far as masks and keeping their workstation clean. You might have to alter some of your employment policies temporarily to deal with some of the differences, and that can be as simple as, you might need to require temperature checks and health survey questions before people come physically into your space, is one example of a policy change. In others, you might need to alter work rules so that the people who are physically on site have the flexibility and the breadth of capability allowed to get the job done, even though they might be asked to do things that aren't normally their jobs. Okay, so with that, you obviously are going to come into issues and exceptions. The biggest is going to be human factors, right? Remember that you've got families who are going to have childcare and family care issues. They might be facing individual health issues, which means they shouldn't come into the office if they have certain types of underlying health issues. Or they simply might not be personally feeling ready. There might be fear, there might be concern. They might worry that if they start coming to work, they won't be able to start visiting sick parents or elderly parents in the near future. And finally, as far as preparing your people, know that you as an employer have responsibilities. I talked about ADA, equal opportunity employment, and OSHA considerations previously. Make sure you understand how those impact your business. And always make note that the very first item for coronavirus relief from the federal government was the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That act requires employees to provide additional sick time paid and additional family and medical leave time. So understand what your responsibilities are, the parameters, make sure your postings are correct, and make sure that you're communicating accurate information to your employees. Communicating inaccurate information about FFCRA to employees, intentional or otherwise, can result in civil or criminal activity. Civil or criminal liabilities for your business, and we certainly want to avoid that. And then finally, prepare to settle in. Remote work will be part of our operations for the foreseeable future. So as you plan your next steps, let's make sure that your team is ideally equipped to continue working from home. And we know that a lot of businesses have gotten folks working from home. A lot of that was a scramble. And so we see a wide variety of environments where people are working from home, but knowing that some people, maybe a majority of people, will be working from home some or a majority of the time for the foreseeable future, let's talk about getting your technology on target. Let's start with security and access. Obviously, people need access to the application, files, and data that they use to do their business, and it needs to be convenient. It also needs to be secure. So some of the getting your tech on target can involve moving data from on-premise servers to cloud file servers, taking advantage of the fact that access is easier and direct and secure. You can map drives to cloud files services from your desktops, whether they're Mac or PC, that give that direct access. That helps you avoid having to use a remote PC, a VPN, or other remote access tools. Those tools increase complexity. So when a problem happens, they're harder to fix and get people working again. They come with licensing costs, and they cause performance delays and latency. And sometimes it actually can affect the quality of the user experience or the ability of the user to use the software they normally use to do their jobs, right? Another strategy with this is to use remote desktop and VDI. This lets the employee's computer just act effectively as a terminal. They log in through a web browser or a small client application into a full desktop that's on a secure private network in the cloud, connected to the servers, the applications, the data they need. You can map in local printers if people need hard copy for what they do. It's all a way of providing access that's more efficient for the end user, doesn't provide too many hurdles for them to be able to log in, get functioning work efficiently, as well as maintaining that security with that access and performance. Additionally, it's really important. We've seen a lot of what we like to call shadow IT services pop up. It's always a problem. It's more so as people scramble to get home. So people working from home, many folks who don't normally work from home might be working on personal computers. They might not know all of the features of your Office productivity suite. So rather than using a secure method of sharing files, they might have signed up for a personal Dropbox account or another file sharing service. They might be using, we've seen people actually forwarding their emails to personal email accounts and using personal calendars. That's a huge no-no. So the best way to eliminate those shadow IT services is to help your team use the existing tools in your productivity suite. This could be some coaching or training or guidance. Some organizations have even asked us to take a look at computers and see what's installed. And there are ways to do that in a non-intrusive way. You should be deploying next generation endpoint protection from viruses, malware, and ransomware and other cyber threats. Chances are, particularly if employees are working on their home computers, their personal computers at home, that they have some level of consumer protection that's not sufficient to protect your business. The good news is most of the next gen tools are designed to run without interfering with other existing endpoint protections and without causing conflict there. So it's something you can add without impacting their ability to use their personal machine. We also strongly recommend deploying web filtering and DNS security to prevent malware from infected websites and from DNS attacks. We're seeing those on the rise. And again, web filtering isn't just, someone clicks on a bad web link from a phishing email that got through. It's someone going to a trusted website, like a news website that's been hacked, where there's third-party content, where that video that auto plays in the background is downloading ransomware. And so we want to make sure that we're protected from that. Just remember, when people are working at home, whether it's a company machine or and it happens more frequently if it's a personal device, other people may be using that computer. If it's a personal device, other people probably are. So you want to make sure that the access and control of your company's data or access to your systems is secure enough and private enough that someone's 9-year-old kid doesn't destroy a project and eliminate all those files. Also, as employers, make sure that your employees have an effective work environment. And this goes on. It's interesting. Way back when cloud was young in the mid 2000s, 2006 to 2008, there was talk about how people are going to get to work from home. One of the issues that came up is that OSHA states that if your employee works regularly from home, you're responsible for the quality of that home environment. And so that's from a comfort and safety issue as well as a technology issue. So we want to make sure that employees are equipped when they're working from home, particularly those that don't normally work from home, that they have the right equipment. Now, we know a lot of businesses ran out and bought laptops or desktops and sent them home with people. Leasing and device as a service rental and integrated service programs can be a more affordable way to get new hardware into the hands of employees. But we've also seen companies saying, you know what, why you've got a good computer at home or you have a computer at home, why don't you just use that? There's no reason to put a second one on your desk. If that's happening, though, make sure that it's truly functional for what the person needs. It should have enough memory, it should have a big enough monitor, and if they're going to be doing meetings by video, should have a decent camera, mic, and speaker system. Whether what's built in is sufficient or you need to add to it comes into play. And so we've worked with a number of companies that have offered to, and actually in some cases insisted, that if someone's going to use their personal computer at home, that the company would pay for those upgrades to get that home workstation up to snuff. At the same point, you want to make sure that the employee is using business licensed software. Now, you don't want someone using an old version of Microsoft Office Home to do work. You're going to lose and collaborate with others. They're going to lose formatting, version, formatting, meta tags, a whole bunch of things will stop working properly, and they won't connect in a secure way to your Office 365 or your Microsoft 365 example environment as an example. And that goes too for other tools that they might use beyond the Microsoft Office suite. Any sort of software that someone uses on a regular basis, if they're now working from home, some or most of the time, provide that business license software to them. You don't want them using pirate. You don't want them using the consumer versions. You want it secure. You want it full feature. You want it compatible with what you do. Surprisingly, one of the largest technology challenges we run into with businesses is about their phone system. As we've been calling out to companies, we're a little surprised at the percentage of companies where when they scramble to shut down the office with a day or two, less than a day or two of planning, they took the main phone number and they forwarded it to someone. So make sure that whoever's answering the company line has the ability to forward that phone call to other employees without disclosing their private home phone or their cell phones, or even be able to send them to voicemail, or have it so that if phone lines are being forwarded to personal devices, that if no one picks up, it goes to the company voicemail system and not the individual's personal voicemail box on their cell phone or their home phone. And so the good news is we've had a couple companies that have decided just to replace their phone system with a voice over IP service. Well, we've also been able to successfully overlay VoIP services on the existing phone service on a temporary basis to provide some of those capabilities and fill in the gaps that are there. Chances are you've got employees working from home who aren't used to working with soft phones or the remote capabilities of your voice system if you have one in place. So training's not a bad idea here either. Employees should have the accessories. This goes back to making them comfortable in the workplace. A noise canceling headset is really helpful, particularly if they've got other people working from home or kids home from school in the background. Ergonomic aids, mouse pads, wrist guards, foot pads, etc., that they might have in their office to work to keep them physically safe and comfortable. And avoid issues like carpal tunnel syndrome. If they have them in the office, those should be at home as well. We've talked with some companies who've made the decision that if people ask, they'll order and ship directly to the house one of the conversion kits that goes on your desk and turns it into a standing desk. If people have that at the office, they want them to have that at home. And of course, you need to make sure that the office is acceptable, that they're on a decent desk, a safe chair. So if it's a spindle with the wheels, it's 5 wheels, not 4, so it doesn't tip, and they have sufficient lighting so that they're not dealing with eye strain. So it all comes into play. The more effective the work environment, the more you work with your employees to make sure their environment is effective in the tools they have, the more productive they'll be, the more loyal and appreciative they'll be that you're taking care of them and not just sending them out to work from home and putting them on their own. Now, when you talk about getting tech on target, there are areas where you can look for savings. So let's talk about that for a second. When we look across our customer base and companies who are coming to us for help, these are the top things we see where companies can save money. First is unused accounts, past employees who have left the company, not even necessarily related to COVID-19, even before. We've gone into companies and found a third of their paid accounts were for past employees. There are several ways to handle it. You can export it. You can keep it in a backup or archive service. You can transfer that data to another employees or to a holding account and remove that user account. Lowering those user counts generally results in lower monthly or lower annual fees. Next is to avoid redundant file services. Zoom's wonderful. Zoom's great. We know of a lot of companies that started with the free version, wanted meetings longer than 40 minutes, and started paying for Zoom services. That's all well and good, but they're running G Suite where you've got Meets, or they're running Microsoft 365 where you have Teams and you can do the conferencing with the screen sharing, with the desktop sharing within the current fees you're paying. You don't need to be paying for a second service. And so we say not just around conferencing and file sharing, there are a number of other services we see where people are paying for third-party tools, even though the capability exists elsewhere that they're already paying for. And sometimes those redundant services are at a company level, sometimes they're personal. This is where Shadow IT comes in. You need to educate your employees, help them adapt to using the tools you're providing, and then restrict the use of unauthorized tools. An employee using a personal Dropbox account to share files with a client or a salesperson doing that to share files or proposals with a prospective client are taking your confidential and proprietary information, taking outside the security envelope of your business and treating it personally. It puts your business, it puts the employee at risk. You don't want to do it. How do you find shadow IT? There's some tools that'll help you search for it. You can ask employees what tools they're using. Certainly if they're on company equipment, you can scan for those tools. Also check their credit card receipts on their expense reports and make sure they're not asking you to pay for a shadow IT service that you don't want them using. Next is to move off to scalable services, move away from fixed assets and capital expenditures to services that can scale and are on an operating expense basis. So we see with the continued use of remote work and work from home, we've had a number of companies come to us and say, hey, look, we need to add more VPN capacity or remote desktop capacity back to our office. And our response is, why invest in that fixed infrastructure where you're not always going to have the level of demand you have now? Why not move the data, move those systems to a place where you can pay for what you use and it can scale up and down with your data, with your employee headcount, with a number of factors. Again, that helps prevent capital from being tied up, which is extremely valuable in this current economy with the current business conditions, and will let you scale your operating expenses with the scope of your business and the scope of the resources that you need. And finally, sensible automation. Don't automate for the sake of automation, but putting sensible automation in, things like the ability to manage electronic signature flows, document reviews, standard forms processing, can all lessen some of the labor that comes around that maybe things were walked around the office in the past. So look for opportunities where a little bit of automation work can save time and increase productivity. And finally, get creative and innovative, right? We know as things open up that retail will probably be doing remote shopping and customer pickup services, much like the curbside pickup for restaurants that has been pretty much a standard nationally. And so we were brainstorming with a number of companies in the space on how they might do it. One of the things that we got in feedback is, even though in the short term, remote shopping and customer pickup might be a necessity, they're getting feedback from customers that they like that level of service and would like to see it continue even as the brick and mortar can open up. And so things to put in place: a lot of retail outlets that don't have online stores don't have the ability to accept online and advanced payments for pickup. Add that into your environment. We see retail offering video shopping appointments where they schedule time in advance. There's a FaceTime or a video conference appointment. You can walk the store, you can show things, you can even model clothing, for example. A little bit of investment here as far as a good device and possibly even a tripod so that one person can set the camera and do the shopping, as opposed to requiring two sets of hands, can come and play. Adding live chat to your website, letting people who have questions not have to pick up the phone and call or send you an email, wait for a reply. The nice thing about live chat is if you've got some people working in the shop and some people working from home, those people working from home can cover the live chat and answer questions about products, research orders, look up inventory, even facilitate sales that don't require the video shopping experience that requires someone being on site. And sort of aligned with that, creating a service desk where questions come in and they get round robined or dispersed among a number of people, whether by phone or email. And there's some affordable tools that make it easier to do, even though you have some of those capabilities built into both the Microsoft 365 and the G Suite environments. And finally, start measuring your customer satisfaction and your Net Promoter Score. As you communicate with customers, ask simple question: how did we do? Great, good, or not so good, right? Simple questions. Start getting that. When people say you're doing great, ask them to give you a comment that becomes a testimonial or a possible referral source. The Net Promoter Score, it's actually a registered, it's a patented system for measuring what percentage of people that you're doing business with would recommend you to someone else. It's another way of tracking customer satisfaction in a way that could generate to more business. And so having your tech on target is great, but now let's take a step back and talk about your recovery roadmap. And when we talk about recovery roadmap, we're really talking about looking at your the desired business outcomes that you want near term, midterm, and long term, translating those into a set of needs and priorities. And this will be unique to every single business we talk to. Those needs and priorities will need the support of IT services, and that will really drive what's in your IT recovery roadmap. And so we want to make sure that, as you think about your desired business outcomes, that your roadmap should help you adapt to the changing conditions, both currently and what you can reasonably anticipate. We have an emphasis when we do these roadmaps on utilizing existing IT services to their fullest. Oftentimes, a little bit of training and coaching of your team can go a lot further than paying for another piece of technology or another application or service. Now, with that, if there's something that you need or that should be in place that your existing IT services don't deliver, let's identify and fill those service gaps. But let's also look for opportunities where adding certain technology might, for example, like a live chat to your website, might improve customer engagement and help you achieve some of those business outcomes, even though it's a net investment at a time when we're all looking to cut costs. And finally, our philosophy is always leverage the cloud for access and security and cost. All those are benefits of the cloud that make it easier to move and to scale as, whether it's a short-term or a long-term chain. So what we do in our recovery roadmap, we look at a couple of factors when we prepare your roadmap for you. We look at the use of on-site versus cloud services, the pros and cons, the cost of doing, the cost of not doing. We focus on meetings and communications. We've talked about how critical that is to your business model and how you're working, on collaboration and productivity. Right now, for people who work at a desk, about 80% of their tasks rely at some point on collaboration with other people. Making sure that you've got secure, productive, efficient, easy to use access to files, data, and applications, and that we're keeping tabs on managing your total cost of operations and keeping that as low as possible, identifying savings, avoiding additional cost and complexity, and avoiding some of the soft costs. Sometimes you say, hey, the software's free, but then the time you spent setting it up, connecting it, and managing it, it can make it a loser. And so we want to keep an eye on that. And of course, security, data protection, and your compliance requirements have to come into play as well. So we actually are offering right now, we believe that every company should have a recovery roadmap that maps out technology priorities, spending, savings, et cetera, how they're going to adjust as they move forward. We're offering a recovery roadmap assessment. The process is really simple. We have a short introductory and kickoff meeting, 15 to 20 minutes. We will then have you complete a questionnaire. This isn't a fluff marketing survey. This will take, on average right now, it's taking companies 40 to 50 minutes, almost an hour to complete. The more information you provide in the questionnaire, the better analysis and the more sound our recommendations will be. We'll take the time. It is a consulting engagement. It's a professional service. Takes us several hours to do that analysis and recommendations. We might contact you with questions or for additional information or clarification, at which point we pull that together and we schedule a review. We walk you through the recovery roadmap and then talk to you about any specific initiatives or ways in which you want to move forward and take next steps. One thing we don't often do, but we're doing with this webcast, is we're going to share a PDF version of this webcast, so all the links in this document will be live. You can click, if you go to this page in that PDF, you can click for service information or contact us, because we've got some programs where we're offering our recovery roadmap assessment at a discount or free of charge. And we can talk to you to see if you qualify for any of those programs. If that seems like a bit much for you, we are doing a COVID-19 response and recovery assessment. This is roughly a 30-minute phone conversation where we're going to discuss a number of aspects of your business, including near-term challenges and near and long-term challenges, goals, and objectives, how well you're using your current IT services, potential areas of unnecessary spending or complexity or redundant capabilities. You can get sense of theme going. We'll look if there are gaps to what affordable options you might have for those, and other issues specific to your business. Again, this is a complimentary. There's no charge, there's no obligation to work with us in any sort of follow-up. One of the best things we can do to help the small business community in general, not just our customers, is to share our time and our expertise and our experience in a way that's productive and helpful. That's the goal of this assessment. If it's something you're interested in, There's a form on our homepage. Hit the homepage, scroll down, you'll see it, a good overview of what the assessment is. You can request your assessment on that page. Your commitment is an approximately 30-minute video session that we're going to do with you that we'll schedule. And so it's all manageable. I've covered a lot of ground. We're approaching the top of the hour. So in wrap up, if you have any questions, open up that questions window. Now's the best time to ask. If there's an area that you have questions about that I haven't covered, let me know. If I don't have the answer with me at hand, I'll certainly share it with you. When we do share out the PDF of this later afternoon or tomorrow, we'll send you the link to this PDF. We have put together a resource list. One of the things I mentioned on the homepage of our site, we pushed the marketing fluff down, and up top, front center, above the fold, if you will, we have a resource center. We've got 3 types of resources. We've got a link to our live web event page, not just our events, but events from trusted sources, be they Chamber of Commerce, small business development centers, some law and accounting firms that are highly regarded with respect to the current situation and that are publishing, making public their analysis and their recommendations. We've got links to those events. We update it every couple days, check back often. We then have a list of business resources. These are blog posts where we're collating and presenting, again, with supporting links. You can see the list of the most recent ones here. We're trying to publish as new information becomes available. The PPP loan forgiveness application and guidance we published late Monday evening on the 18th. We collated analysis of that process and of that application based on input from Forbes, from the AICPA, and from 3 or 4 accounting and law firms. I forget exactly the number there. And so we're trying to provide useful, timely resource information. On the tech side, we're also doing a series of blog posts as we see technology issues related to COVID-19 coming. We've seen people make cuts that they in certain IT spending that they're already regretting. We're advising against some of those cuts. We're also identifying, I talked about some of them in this presentation, where you can look for IT savings without hurting the business. So you get the savings without impeding operations or making it more difficult for your employees to do their job. And probably the biggest issue we've seen from a problem response is we've seen a huge spike in phishing attacks and scams around COVID-19 topics. And a lot of those have been getting through some of the traditional filters. And so there's steps you can take from employee awareness to protection methods and making sure that you have the ability to respond and recover should you be attacked. We've got blog posts on that. Some other ones is not related to phone issues. A sample policy if you're having people use personal devices for work for the first time, and some other tools and things that we see as helpful. Also, for this presentation, I've pulled together a list of resources, general guidance and regulations for business employers as far as a safe place to work and opening up, information about the Families First Coronavirus Recovery Act. Those notices must be posted in the workplace. We recommend and have had it recommended that if your company has an intranet, they should be posted there as well so people working from home have access to it. We've got links to the posters, the English, Spanish, and the simplified Chinese versions here. Great information from the CDC about cleaning and disinfecting. These do talk about different industries. If you want to see a longer industry by industry assessment, go to our website. We have a copy of the leaked CDC report, the one that wasn't published by the White House. They published a watered down version. This is a more comprehensive version. It's available in our blog as well. Additional information from the CDC, State Department about social distancing, screening and monitoring employee health, business travel, and protective equipment. So hopefully you're able to tap those resources. Again, we'll send you a copy of the slides. You'll have those active links. You can tap those resources as well. So at this point, before I get into the Q&A, I want to thank everyone for joining us who's watching this as the on-demand recording. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and week for participating. If you have any questions, let me go back here. You can contact us, info@cumulusglobal.com. Our toll-free and toll number are there. You can also contact me directly. You've got my email on the screen, afalcon@cumulusglobal.com, as well as my direct line to my desk. I do not have an executive assistant, so this comes directly to me. I will tell you, as I always do, I'm much better about answering emails than I am about answering the phone or responding to voice messages. The best way to reach me is by email. And again, I promise a swift response, either directly myself or, if more appropriate, a member of my team. So on that, I want to thank the folks who are watching the on-demand webcast for joining us. Have a great day and stay healthy and safe.